All right, happy Saturday morning, everybody. Welcome into week 4 of the college football season, the Alabama Pregame Show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. I'm your host, Simone Eli, alongside Matt Scalisi. Week 4 of the season already. It feels like fall. I said this the other day, but now it legitimately feels like fall. I don't know how long it's going to stay here, Matt, but the weather is beautiful. I would walk my dogs 10 times a day if it's going to feel like this throughout the day.
It's fantastic right now. I was hiking yesterday and wasn't even breaking a sweat. I got a sweater on with some coffee this morning. This is full fall mode. And yes, like you said, we live in Alabama, so that probably means that it's going to be in the 90s again in the next 2 weeks at some point. But let's just enjoy it. Let's make hay while we can.
Yeah, for those of you going to the game tonight, a 6:30 kickoff against Southern Miss at Bryant-Denny Stadium. The game is on SEC Network, but it should be a good atmosphere, the first night atmosphere that we'll have at Bryant-Denny this year. It will be cooler, so that's exciting. They'll check all those boxes. The game, probably not the one everyone's looking forward to quite yet, but nonetheless, it's a home game at Bryant-Denny Stadium. It'll be a good atmosphere. We're not going to spend a ton of time talking about Southern Miss, but I think this is a very critical game in terms of what Nick Saban wants to see when it comes to tuning up before jumping back in SEC play, Matt.
Yeah, I think in terms of getting this team's mindset right, this is pretty ideal circumstances. You're going up against a team that is very outmatched. They're from a respectable group of 5 conference, but they're still, this Southern Miss program is not what it was back when this game meant something to the Alabama fan base.
Sure.
This should be not a super challenging game. That said, there are a lot of challenges facing this Alabama team, and I think Nick Saban wants them to impose those challenges on themselves. I think, as big a win as last week was, we all know that's not the standard Alabama holds itself to. And I think Nick Saban and probably the rest of those fans in the stadium tonight want to see this team look sharp. They want to see them look like they're developing and advancing through the season.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I think it was clear after the game that fans alike, coaches alike, Saban were kind of grateful. We're glad to walk away from the swamp with a 2-point win. A win is a win. But in ways, it felt like a loss when it came to some of the fan reaction. It felt like a loss when it came to some, maybe some frustrations that we saw on the sidelines or with coaches throughout this week. But Saban has been very clear, Matt, this week and kind of what his message to fans when it comes to being positive, when it comes to kind of appreciating wins like we saw in Florida, hard-fought wins with young guys on both sides of the ball, but especially some new pieces on the offensive side. Matt, it feels like that has kind of been the trend for Coach this week, is to kind of get his message out there. Sometimes it's for players. This week, it feels like he has kind of directed his attention towards the fan base a little bit.
Yep. Saban, as we say in the title down there, he coaches the fans here too. And I think that's been a big part of his success at Alabama. I think if you go back and look at the years before his arrival, it was hard to get everybody on the same page in Tuscaloosa. There's no question that there's a lot of passion about football in Alabama and always has been, but not everybody always agrees on the right way to succeed and the right way to do it. And what Saban has done more than anything else is get everybody around the program, players, administrators, fans. He gets them all to buy into one single approach and process, if you will. And we're seeing it. We every few years, I think he feels like he needs to rein the fan base in a little bit and say things like we've been hearing him say this week. Things like, you guys need to appreciate winning. You need to remember what it's like to not expect winning every time. And I don't think Saban wants anybody to lower their standards, but I think that he can sense some entitlement creeping into the program. And it may just mostly be in the fans right now, but he knows that can work its way into all different parts of the program. It can work its way into the support staff and even into the players. So he wants everybody on the same page. And I think today is a big opportunity for that, because we know what's coming up for the rest of this schedule. And there might be some disappointment about what you've seen from the team so far, but I think he also wants to feel like the community supports the team,
Sure.
and is still has their back, is still excited to come and see them play and win.
Yeah, here's a clip quick. I know we have this one pulled up, Matt. His Saban, just a little bit of his message to the fans from earlier this week. Here's what Coach had to say.
We need to play to our standard. We need to do the things that we do well. You know, it's always great to, you know, play at Bryant-Denny Stadium, to be home. You know, I'd like to, you know, see our fans, you know, have some passion and enthusiasm and energy for this team. And I think it would be helpful to them.
All right, well, there you go. Coach, a little bit of a therapy lesson, it sounds like, for fans. He'd like to see more passion, more enthusiasm for this team. Of course, you know, folks like to weigh in. Social media is a big part of the world nowadays. Everyone's a coach. You know, I do it. You do it, Matt. We all have something to say. Coach knows what it takes to win difficult football games, and he knows that this, you know, this game coming up is kind of a tune-up for what is ahead. But I get the sense that he wants to make it very, very clear that this is a process. Like you said a minute ago, this is a process with younger pieces, especially with Bryce Young, a young guy who's extremely, extremely talented. Nothing to take away from Bryce Young, but there are moments where you are watching this offense. You're wondering what the pieces look like. Heck, you're watching the defense and you're wondering what, you know, if, you know, things are going to come along the way that Alabama has played, the standard that they have set up for themselves, and really what fans and people alike have come to expect.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's been a while since Alabama fans had to deal with something like this, had to deal with development of a team. Yeah. And, you know, I think I don't want to sound like I'm being overly critical, because Alabama fans are just watching and enjoying greatness. And I think they're having a very natural reaction to it. And I'll admit, even myself watching it, and I do this for a living, it has taken me a few weeks to get my head around how different this team is from the 2020 Alabama team.
Yeah,
I think we all knew we were watching a great team last year, but I don't think it was until I saw this year's team that I really appreciated how much experience there was on that 2020 team and how much of a difference that made. I mean, they all really, especially on the offense, those guys were just so on the same page with each other. They could read each other's minds practically at a certain point. And that takes time. It takes reps. It takes years of practice, not one off season. It takes working together in practice for years as a group. And Bryce Young just has not had that. He has not had that opportunity. Even if he had been there longer than he already has, we're talking about some key players on this team that are freshmen or transfers. So they're first-year guys in this program. They just all haven't really worked together that much. I think the more we see that happen, you will see that chemistry that resembles a little more of what we saw last year.
Yeah.
I don't know how soon we'll see it. I don't even know if we'll see it this season. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't win with a team like this, or the team full of mostly superior athletes. I mean, the truth is, no matter how long these guys have played together, Alabama's still going to be the most talented team on the field in probably every game they play this season. Sure. So they can find ways to win. It just might not look as effortless as we saw in a lot of those games last year.
Yeah, no doubt, Matt. If you're just tuning in, the Alabama Pregame Show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. He's Matt Scalisi. I'm Simone Eli. Bama kicks off at 6:30 tonight at Bryant-Denny Stadium against Southern Miss, tied favored by 45 points. We appreciate y'all tuning in and all of your comments. Brian Robinson, day-to-day, according to Nick Saban, because of a bit of a rib injury. We'll see how much guys who how much starters actually play, how much veteran guys actually play today. Expect a lot of younger guys to get action. With that said, we know Nick Saban wants to see a full 60 minutes. A lot of mental and physical execution throughout this game will be huge, especially going into Ole Miss at home and Texas A&M on the road, back-to-back difficult SEC matchups in the West that are super, super important for the Tide. If we take a look back at some of the stats from last week against Florida, Matt, Bama straight up outplayed. This is the first quarter stats here, and the Tide came out about as well as you could expect. Scoring pretty quickly. Things weren't perfect, but looked pretty automatic. And then when you look at the second through fourth quarters, it just was not the same. I mean, let's look at the numbers. They speak for themselves. Florida completely outplayed Alabama, not only points, but I mean, the rushing attack was unbelievable. So I want to break this down just a little bit, Matt, in a couple different ways. First of all, playing a full 60 minutes. We've heard Saban harp on this before, and there's no doubt they will be up early and quickly on this Southern Miss team, but the expectation is to play for 4 quarters.
Yeah, he has not had a full game that he wants to see from his team this season. We know that they've played well enough to win all 3 games, but they've had a down point in every game. They've had a significant period of each game where the effort was not the same, where the guys took their foot off the gas a little bit. And, I think that's pretty natural for a younger team, but it's not. He also knows that there were a few games last year where they needed all 4 quarters. They had to be on top of their game for the entirety of the game. We know that was the case against Ole Miss last year. It was the case against Florida as well. So I think Saban's never really going to feel comfortable unless he knows his team can go wire to wire playing with that level of intensity. So, yeah, I think that's going to be a point of emphasis today. I don't think this game is necessarily – even though I do agree that we're going to see a lot of backups today, I don't think that necessarily means that Saban wants this game to feel like Alabama gets up big and takes their foot off the gas and takes it easy for the rest of the game. I think he really feels like he needs to see intensity for 4 quarters in this game. Might mean that you do leave some of those starters in for a little bit longer, but we'll see how that goes. I mean, like you said, some guys banged up after last week. Will Anderson had a great game a week ago, but I don't think he looked like he was full speed in that game. Brian Robinson obviously got a little banged up, and thankfully you can kind of afford to go without him today with that incredible stable of running backs Alabama has.
Yeah, no doubt. And, I want to talk – we talked about this last week on the post-game show, and I felt like fans were kind of overlooking this because it's easy to criticize the offense and kind of forget that there's 2 sides to football, 3 sides really, but one side is very significant, and that would be defensively. Bama gives up 245 on the ground. That is not a normal thing for Alabama. Not only is it not normal, but it straight will not get it done in the SEC. That is how you win in the SEC. You stop the run and you run the ball. And Bama's been really good at stopping the run and running the ball. So to give up 245 and 4 touchdowns on the road at the Swamp, we're not going to sit here and pick that apart for the Southern Miss game. What that looks like moving forward is slightly concerning. It's one thing that Nick Saban addressed this week, Matt. And it felt like, yes, there were times Will Anderson maybe wasn't himself, but it also felt like if Will Anderson wasn't making a play defensively, they were getting gashed because it just felt like there were pieces that were not really coming together cohesively as you would kind of expect from that, first and second tier defense.
I think the second level of Alabama's defense was definitely left a lot on the table last week. And, we have seen a lot of really good plays from them this season. So I think some of it was Florida had a very specific plan of attack that took advantage of Alabama and then was tough to prepare for. And in fact, Alabama may not have really been able to prepare for that at all because I'm not sure anybody saw this sort of option-based offense coming from Dan Mullen. That's going to happen sometimes. Alabama didn't adjust over the course of the game really, and they kind of had to survive. But yes, they're gonna need better play from Henry To'oTo'o and from Christian Harris. I think too. The linebackers are so crucial when you are playing an option attack specifically, but really any really run-based offense. You need your linebackers to get out there, shed blocks, and make plays. And they didn't get it done last week. I think there was some confusion. You saw some lack of communication at the point of attack when it looked like they would have the play read, but two guys are in the same place at the same time. So somebody made a mistake there. I think that linebackers are probably going to be getting a lot of Saban's ire until they can show that they can play a cleaner game. They can make fewer mental errors out there on the field. I still think for the most part, and not kind of brush off concerns about this defense. I do think there was some good pressure in the backfield from that Alabama defense last week. I also think the secondary played really well for the most part. I mean, Florida was not able to do much in the passing game. So,
Right.
but it does show that if you have one weak link in the defense, it doesn't matter how well you play everywhere else. So they're going to need to shore up their run defense. And I think I'll go ahead and go out on a limb and predict they have a really good performance today against the rushing attack. But next week is going to be a real test because that Ole Miss offense can do pretty much everything. They're good at whatever they want to do, and it's going to be tough. Alabama's going to have to play well in every phase defensively to slow that attack down.
Yeah. Saw this in the comments earlier in the show, and it goes without saying that a clean and penalty-free game is going to be very significant for the Tide tonight. Nick Saban has talked so much about penalties, and one area of concern that we have seen, at least last game, was a difficult environment. Now, Alabama's going to face difficult environments, not this week, not next week, but when you go into Aggie Land and Kyle Field and you're facing 100,000 strong, it's going to be loud. It's going to be a huge rivalry game for this Aggie program, expecting to do well at home. When it comes to penalties, Matt, Saban expected a very clean performance, especially from the offensive guys. That's where we saw a lot of false starts, a lot of issues there when it comes to just communication because of the crowd noise. Again, not something we're necessarily going to see today in the friendly confines of Bryant-Denny Stadium or maybe next week, although it'll be loud against Ole Miss, but was something that needed to be addressed by Saban and something he did discuss post-game and a little bit this week. Also something that he does think is going to improve as this team gets more experience together.
I think so. I mean, especially the offensive line-based penalties, the false starts and I think holding to some degree comes from that too. It comes from being out of position and not having the help you're supposed to have. So I think the offensive line, that's got to be top of the wish list today is let's see if we can play a whole game without any self-inflicted wounds offensively. But it's not just offensive line issues for Alabama when it comes to penalties. They're actually one of the worst teams in the country right now when it comes to penalty yardage. I believe they're ranked in the 120s somewhere. Never a place that you want to be, especially if you're Alabama. So, there's been some personal fouls. There's been some pass interference, I think, has obviously been an issue. And that's to some degree understandable because of the way that the game is called now. We know Alabama's benefited from a bunch of pass interference penalty calls too this year. But overall, just has not been a clean performance from this team yet. There are a lot of unforced errors. And I think in a game like today where there shouldn't be frustration, there shouldn't be distraction, I think it's reasonable to expect a penalty-free game, and we'll see if they're capable of that.
All right, guys. So 6:30 kickoff. Southern Miss coming to town. Alabama, top-ranked Alabama, looking to stay perfect on the year. They will today, but a big tune-up for Ole Miss and Texas A&M before Alabama gets back in SEC play. Matt, any final thoughts before we sign off here? It's going to be a beautiful day at Bryant-Denny Stadium, folks. We
do have a commenter asking if we think they're going to win by the expected 45 in Vegas. Don't take any of my advice if you are making a financial decision about this score ever. But I will say I think Alabama gets their foot on the gas today for the entire game. I don't think they're not gonna hold up, and I think they can get over that 45-point margin. But we'll see. Yeah. I mean, maybe I'm underestimating Southern Miss. I don't know.
I don't think you should underestimate Southern Miss. I mean, this is a team that lost 31-7 to South Alabama, and no disrespect South Alabama because Kim Womack's doing a great job, but they struggled. That was week 1 of the season. It was not a pretty situation for Southern Miss. Something tells me it will not be a pretty situation for Southern Miss at Bryant-Denny. Regardless, Nick Saban expecting a full 60 minutes, a full 4 quarters from guys, whether you're the starter or fourth string. He has high expectations to see guys start, compete, be mentally and physically tough, and execute throughout the entire game. 6:30 kickoff, Bryant-Denny Stadium. Guys, thanks so much for tuning into Alabama Pregame Show. We will see you guys on the post-game show after the game tonight. Y'all enjoy it for those going to the game, for those not going to the game. enjoy some good food, hanging out in this fall weather, because it probably will not last too much longer, as we know how the weather goes here in the state of Alabama. But guys, thanks for tuning in. He's Matt Scalisi. I'm Simone Eli. This is the Alabama Pregame Show, brought to you by Medical Properties Trust.
Medical Properties Trust, at the very heart